It's Monday, August the 19th, and I'm doing an interview with Sonya Zohar, a good friend of mine who also does field research. She's been involved, I think, for about 10 years. And Sonya was given an opportunity to come visit me back in, I think it was October 2015. She came down from California. And I had rented a cottage for a week in the same area Neff and family live, and she got to witness some amazing, incredible things that showed her their abilities, and she's here to talk about her experiences and what we experienced together. Sadly, the connection, her Wi-Fi isn't working so well, so I've had to take off the video part. So we're just going to deal with audio. It seems to be much clearer that way. So, I was hoping to get us both on camera here, but, it's not going to happen. Anyways, so Sonya, if you want to say hi to everybody and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Mike, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today, so thank you.
You can actually flip your camera on just for a sec so they can see it's really you.
There we go.
All right, that works.
That works?
Yeah, actually, maybe keep it on until it starts screwing up, right?
Okay.
Because it's going to screw up. We've been at this for about the last, I don't know, half hour maybe, trying to get this thing to work. So, anyways, yeah, so this was, I think back in October 2015, we went to that cottage and we spent a week there and some crazy shit went down.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
There was an incident we had, I think it was maybe about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my back was hurting. So I'd left Sonya back at the cottage. I went walking up it's a long driveway, gravel. It's all surrounded by woods. And at the end of the driveway, it's just all woods there, right? So I got up to the end and I laid down on my back on the gravel. It was late, there was no people around, nothing. It was very late. And as soon as I laid down on the gravel, I heard a footstep literally few inches from the back of my head, just stepped right down on the gravel right behind me as soon as I laid down. And I've done this enough so I'm comfortable with it. And I sat up, I gave a little chuckle, and I said, "Hold on, I'll be right back in a minute." And I went back down to the cottage, and I grabbed Sonya. I said, "Come on, Sonya, we have Sasquatch here." So we grabbed the blanket, we walked up the road. We walked up to the same spot at the end of the driveway, and we sat down on the gravel. And I don't remember how long it was before this happened, but it was just a few minutes. It didn't take long at all. And suddenly something large came charging through the bush, and it was very still night, so you could hear everything. It was one of those, you hear a pin drop, quiet. And something came tearing through the bush at us, and about maybe less than 10 feet from us, I remember it doing this double foot stomp as it turned and went the other way. And I heard all this, we heard all this rustling, and then it just kind of disappeared into nothingness, stopped, and that was it. It was, there was a brief moment there where I tensed up and I was thinking we were being charged by a bear, right? It was that size. So, but it was no bear. And, we both sat there, we held our own. It was quite the tense moment. And then it was after that, Sonya wanted to go back down to the cottage and discuss what we just experienced.
Decompress is a better word.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Decompress.
Decompress. It was really a very defining moment in my research. I have to admit, Mike tells a story, and it was actually really a significant experience. And it didn't really start that night. I really feel for me, the experience started the night before. And that was, Mike and I had gone out about 11 p.m.-ish, 11:30-ish. We were walking along a snowmobile road that was a more commonly used road. And we were sitting kind of in the crook of a road. And if you can imagine, there was a crook here, and there's like a bay that comes in, so the water was here. And then there's like there was a hill, a slope, and we were standing in this crook next to the slope. Now, this was the night before the experience that Mike is talking about. And something came down the hill towards us, and it had a very distinct sound. It went trash, trash, trash. Now, this was October, so the leaves had fallen. So imagine this was just a nice, mild weather. I mean, it was cool. We had jackets on, but not like overly cold. Nice October evening, very clear, very still. Very close to a new moonish, or right after the new moon. So there was just a sliver of the moon. So we had a tad bit of light, but again, not much. And where we're located is so far out, there were no like human lights or anything like that. So that's always good too, because when there's no human lights and there's more natural moonlighting, you actually can see a lot better. Anyway, at night. So we were standing there, and this noise came down the hill. It went trash, 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 boom, trash, trash, the other way. Now, the noise of it to me sounded like something that was a deer size or smaller, bigger than a raccoon, possibly a smaller deer. But that's how the noise sounded up to me, showed up to me. But although I didn't know, it was at night, and it was very clear. It went trash, 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 boom, trash, trash, the other way. Mike was certain that was a Sasquatch. He's like, oh, that was a Sasquatch. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But I didn't say anything. I'm like, I don't know. It's not my territory. It's the first time I've been in here. My expectations are open, and I'm open to possibility. At the same time, the noise could have fallen very easily into a category that could have been any other animal. Nevertheless, we go home that night. That was the night it wasn't the night we heard the howling, but we go home, go out the next night. And then we're on a different part. Like Mike said, he'd gone out, he'd heard this noise. He comes back into the cabin. He says, let's go out and take another look. And we go to a different road. Now, where we were this time, where the tree lines were pretty flat for the most part. But we were at the tree line. We were at a road. We had our backs turned, the tree line against us, the road, small dirt road in front of us, and another tree line across the way. Now, we were both sitting there on a blanket. It's like 3:30 in the morning by this time, and it was really late, really early-ish, late-ish. And I remember very much, I'm looking into the tree line with this little light that we had and a little tiny bit of fog, and really just wanting to see any movement. It was a very still and quiet night. Mike and I, neither Mike nor I were talking. We're very much into just watching the dark woods at night. And something came up behind us, and it came out of the blue. Again, it was a very defining moment in my research, because I knew I had experienced their speed before. I knew they were fast. I just had not experienced it this palatable yet. So, not palatable. That's not the wrong word. That's not the right word. But anyway,
Palpable.
Yeah, it wasn't palatable, because it wasn't palatable at all, actually. It was the antithesis. So something from my left comes at us. Trash, 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 boom. Trash, trash. Now, what was very interesting is it came up so far from behind us, so quick, so loud, that as I was sitting there on the ground, my body actually didn't move forward. It didn't move forward. I didn't have time. My body didn't even, my shoulders nothing happened. It happened so quick that actually my body did not have a physical response. It didn't have time. It was so quick. It was so large. The boom behind us was almost it really, to me, was as large as a bull. I mean, it was boom. And then it was trash, and then trash very, very far behind us. Now, what was also very unique about this experience, or very interesting to me about this experience, was that it went trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. That's when I actually got scared. You would think that the whole experience would be scary, and it was really frightening, because it was something that came at us at a lightning speed. It was something that stopped on a dime. It made a huge sound and presence. It stopped right behind us. I didn't have time to move. But earnestly, the thing that really rattled my cage was the very last trash. And I really feel like in that moment, even not even me talking about it from the past, in that moment, I realized that that last trash, that last hitting of the leaves that was so far away, was really an energy to tell me, or to tell us, how far and how fast it could move. That was key. And that's what was frightening, because prior to that experience, I have no mental construct in my mind for anything that can move around me that fast. So what I'm saying is, if I've had a horse charge at me before, I was walking a friend's dog, and I had no idea that this one horse didn't like this dog. It was a big Rottweiler, and I was walking it through the neighborhood, and the horse saw it and just took off and charged at me and the dog. Obviously, I was with the dog, and seeing that come at me full force, what we experienced together in those woods was nothing like that. As frightening as having that horse come at me full speed and charging, it was nothing like I experienced from whatever came up behind us. So that moment was really defining. And that very last part of it, if I had to make a guess, I would say the expanse that it covered was probably about 70 yards, with the last being about almost 25, 50 yards. Like, it made this noise so far away and so subtle. It was just almost like a ballerina touched down, just to say, and now I'm here, and now I'm gone. So that was the physical experience of it for the most part. There's this other part of it, when you really think about it in context, again, like I said, I have no mental construct for something that can move around me that large and that fast. And Mike had brought up a good point. He did say that he felt like it could have been a bear charging at us. But the reality of all of that is, because it had that size, is it had it been a moose, had it been a bear, and had it been a cougar, even if it was a wolf, there's no reason at all that it would stop its forward trajectory, especially if it was coming at us, right? If it was something that was charging us, it was charging us. It didn't have to bluff. There were no fences. It did that on purpose, and it stopped behind us, I would say, within 5 to 10 feet of our backs. It was a very, 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 very charged moment, for sure. And afterwards, what was so funny is, all I could say was that one of these experiences, so when I first started doing Bigfoot, and when I first got involved, I had someone constantly tell me that when I would go in the field, they were constantly reminding me about how dangerous it was. And what's so funny about that is, it's almost like someone telling you that California is dangerous because it has, earthquakes. And they're like, you're going to have an earthquake in California. You're going to have an earthquake. And you're not so moved by it until you move to California, and then your house moves, you have an earthquake and your house moves 7 inches off the foundation and moves 7 inches back on. And then you move back to wherever you came from. You actually understand what an earthquake is. And so early on in my research, I had someone that constantly would tell me, Sonya, if it gets a hold of you, I can't track it. I can't kill it. There's nothing I can do for you. You'll be gone. And when they would say that to me, I would just be like, okay, yeah, I got it. Well, in that moment, for sure, when Mike and I were sitting there, that's what came up for me. I realized You can't track it. You can't kill it. If it gets a hold of you, you'll be gone. And that's all I could actually say in those moments. Because it was something else. Like I said, I can't impress upon you enough. I do not have a mental construct of something that can actually physically move around me that fast. The agility of whatever it was that came at us, the speed and the size, I don't know of anything. And I, like I said, I can imagine maybe a moose. I could imagine a moose in a charge could maybe encapsulate that kind of experience. But then again, a moose has no reason not to show itself, and it could not be gone that quick. I mean, there's no reason for that. So whatever it was, for lack of a better word, had a, what we would all want to call a paranormal essence. It was something that was out of this world. And it shaped and it's molded my whole research, because a lot of people, and even I have this understanding that it moves really fast, but you really don't understand how fast it moves until it moves that fast around you. It doesn't make sense. And that's one of the things in, Sasquatch, in the whole research, the challenge with Sasquatch is nobody wants to admit, by and large, that there are these other qualities that are, for lack of a better word, paranormal. And yet, the substantial evidence that we have actually is all of that kind of evidence. Even the most conservative hunter who had only one experience in his life, at some point will have to admit something seemed otherworldly about the experience. Even though we were all talking that it's this biological being, which it does have a biology. We know this. It has a biology. And we're also all having these other experiences. And like I said, that was a very poignant moment for me. This thing has, whatever it is, has the almost it's hard for me to express its ability to move.
I had an incident actually at the cottage where Neff was on one side, and I think he vocalized, and it was just like, it seemed like a couple seconds he's vocalizing on the other side. And I remember mentioning to Dwayne how fast he moved from one side to the other. It was pretty mind blowing.
I had an incident with where was I? I was at one of the conferences, and one of the native elders had come in to bless the conference. And after the conference, I spoke with him a bit, and he actually in the conference, he basically had told all of us, I mean, to be quite honest, to leave it alone, to stop doing this research, leave it alone. Their peoples have been around the Sasquatch culture for a long time, and that, you're supposed to leave them alone. And so that is what he had said. And I went and spoke with him afterwards, and we talked for quite a while. And one of the things he said to me that also landed with me, after speaking with him and somewhat befriending him, he said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you something." He goes, taps on my shoulder. He said that anytime you're dealing with Sasquatch, if you think the sound is over there, he kind of smiled and he got that little glint in his eye. He goes, no. He goes, that means the Sasquatch is right here. So he's already explaining to me that they're tricksters, right?
Definitely tricksters.
Definitely tricksters. Mm-hmm.
I have an incident on audio where you can hear Neff vocalizing way off in the distance. And as soon as he does that, there's a big stick crack break right at the audio recorder simultaneously. So there's a happening right there at the audio, and then off in distance, exact same time. They both, it's just incredible, some of the stuff they can come up with, and their timing is always impeccable.
Well, and that's what's so fascinating to me is it really is, There's so many people who start this journey, and myself included. You know, we started this journey looking for Gigantopithecus, you know, actually looking for a bipedal North American primate. And it is, we know it does have a biology. It have tracks and we have visuals. And then, you know, as you start to delve into the research and start to actually have more encounters, you start to realize that it's something different. I haven't really put my finger on what it is, but it's not like us. It does have some sort of omniscient energy. And I think one of the things that a lot of people will admit, like you and myself, we've had these experiences, and even Rich Dermo would, out of the Olympic Project, he would even state the same thing, that the odd thing is that once you do the research and you're engaging the energy, it follows you home. It follows you home. Does it not, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to move four times throughout this journey since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
12, I think. And they've shown up in every place.
Yeah.
This place here that I live now, which I absolutely love it here. The second day while I was unpacking, I had a paranormal incident right in front of my face.
Yeah.
I have this mask. Parents brought me back from one of their world trips. I did a lot of traveling, so. And this mask, it had a bead under the eye, and it fell out as I was unpacking. So I just stuck it on a shelf, and I put the little bead right beside it, and it kind of rolled off to the edge, and it went down the crack between the shelf and the wall. So I was like, okay, it's not going anywhere. So I just left it. And the next day, I grabbed a knife to pop it out, and I went and looked, and it's not there. I was like, where the hell did that thing go? And all of a sudden, the little shelf just above it, the bead just started bouncing, just right there on an empty shelf as I was sitting there looking for it. You know, those little things like that, they have happened a lot. I had 2 incidents here this week, and I had an incident with my phone, which is the third incident where there's been a manipulation of my phone. You know, they can manipulate our electronics to a degree. It's just it's crazy, some of the stuff that I've been witness to. But anyways, besides that, back to your visit. And so you had some other stuff go on too when we were up in the woods there. You had physical contact.
Well, so after that experience, yes. And I do want to say too, when we first got to the cabin, I do want to mention, because this doesn't really happen too often. And I know this is one of those things that it's like woo woo, but the reality is we're all experiencing it. So, you know, I did have, I guess, you know, I have to admit I had an incident of mind speak. And that was when I first got to the cabin. We walked in, and Mike has many recordings of Nefertia and his voice. And we walked in, and it didn't seem like, it was very strange. We were just putting our stuff away, you know, like I was putting my stuff in my room and just getting settled in. And I clearly heard something say, Mike, like just like Neff would. And I mean, clearly it was Neff. And clearly it was that voice. And I stopped and I said, are you on your computer? Did you just play something? He's like, no. And he wasn't. He was just putting stuff away like me. We're putting groceries away and getting set up. And I was like, what's going on? And I go, I clearly just heard something say, Mike. I heard Neff's voice. And so that was our introduction, right? So yeah, so after that experience happened, you know, of course we had to decompress. Let's go back to that. So we're sitting on that little blanket. I'm totally freaking out. Mike's kind of laughing at me, I think, inside, because, you know, it was a huge experience. And
you held your own just fine. You did great.
Oh, I know, but inside, you know, Mike's like, he looks at me, he goes, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And a couple of things were coming out, coming up for me. Like I said, you can't outrun it. That was going through. And also Mike said, well, do you want to go back? He goes, oh, what was it you said? It was so funny. He said, Sonya, most people would be running right now. And I remember just looking at you like, you can't outrun that. Like what crazy person would get up and run right now? Like any person that had half a brain that could actually be logical in this moment, like that thing just came and went in like 6.2 seconds. And it covered 100 yards in that amount of time. And it was as big as a bull. Like, I'm going to outrun that. And I was kind of going, we're not outrunning it. Plus, I was very clear, because I'm stubborn as an ox. I'm just as stubborn, which is really funny. I was also very clear that Sasquatch is a biological being, and we do know it's a predator. And all I want to say when you say predator, people have such woo-woo about that word. It just means it hunts, right? So it's just logical. You don't run from a predator. You just don't. So there were two things that were going through my mind. One, you can't outrun it. And second of all, I wasn't going to outrun it. And third, I was not going to lose my composure in front of it. There was no way I was going to give in to that. So I just said to Mike, we're just going to sit here until I'm calm. We're going to give it some space. And then we're going to go back to the cabin, and I'm going to probably freak out all day. I'm just letting you know, we're not going to get any sleep. I'm going to freak out because I don't know what that was. That was incredible. So of course we sat there for a few minutes, and when I was ready, I said, okay, let's just walk slowly and calmly back to the cabin. Then we got in the cabin, and I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? Anyway, so of course, I'm in this. I mean, I know I just experienced probably one of the top 10 most frightening things. And it wasn't even frightening because happened so quick. And you didn't even have time to be scared. So anyway, but I'd experienced this experience. And so that just made me push. And so I said to Mike, okay, so where is it? Where do you feel that they are? Where do they come from? Where do they live? Where do they spend the most amount of their time in this area? I want to go there tomorrow night. And so we did. He's like, okay. So we went to this other part of the forest. So we went in this dark and deep area, and we sat there in the middle of the night, and I just said some things, and we hung out there for a while. And my cat, he set it up. He said, Neff, if you're in the area, please touch Sonya tonight. And oddly enough, I really did experience something like touching my ear. And it was odd because I was like, am I imagining that, or is something actually touching me? Because nothing was around me. And it just felt like something was softly just touching my ear. So that happened. And then when we did decide to leave, we left some gifts and some treats for them. And then when we decided to leave, we were walking away, and something very much so grabbed the back of my clothing and pulled me backwards. And when I turned around, it was not Mike. I don't know what that was. Mike was just getting up from his seat to leave, and I had already started, and he wasn't anywhere close. It wasn't a joke. Something pulled me backwards. So much that he saw it. I mean, I went backwards. And so yeah, we had those experiences the next night. And then we had it was the following night. We were on the chairs. We heard all the howls. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the physical contact you had too. There was, like you mentioned before, but three separate incidents that went on with you being touched on the ear.
Oh yeah.
There was, and when it comes to this sort of thing, I don't fool around. I never fool around.
Well, no, you don't have the
space. Zero tolerance for that. I just don't do it.
Well, and you're not the only one. In this field research, if you learn anything, you can't do stuff like that. Because if you do stuff like that, then you can't trust somebody. And if you can't trust somebody, you can't do this work.
No,
you just can't. So it's a double-edged sword. You really can't just goof off. You have to be pretty sober to be doing this type of work, and not joking around, because things like that will happen. I mean, I really had to sit there And it really felt like something was just going like this over my ear. And I'm like, am I imagining that? Like, but you know, yeah, something was touching my ear.
There was other things that went down on at the cottage too, but this crazy stuff that we're not ready to disclose yet at this point. But
well, I think, and this is something that every researcher that I've known, to some point, if you're really in the research, if you're really doing the work and you're actually making the connection with that energy that's happening in the forest, everybody will admit at some point that something strange is happening. So I don't know, we just have to talk about it. But what happened to us inside the cabin was, it even got even more stranger. But that to me, I don't know, everything has its time and place, but yeah, it was it was very strange.
you know, I get a lot of accusations and bullshit thrown at me, you know, all this hoax crap. So I'm happy to have Sonya finally come on camera. You know, this is after a few years now, and comfortable enough to, you know, validate that situation, and that it's paranormal, for lack of a better word. You know, it's unknown, very unknown.
Well, and I think too, which has been really interesting too, there's been a couple of things though that has been expanding our ability to talk about these things. Because like I said, a lot of researchers, even Ron Moorhead will say, you know, at first, even his friends at the camp, they didn't want to say everything that was going on at the camp, because it was just kind of like, how do you have an explanation for that? Like one of the things Ron talks about, Mr. Moorhead talks about, was at the Sierra camps, like one night, they thought something was trashing their camp. They heard metal hit metal. They heard the craziest sounds outside of their enclosure. And they really expected to wake up in the morning and find their whole campsite just torn apart. And when they got out of bed at night and they got up, nothing had been bothered. And they could not account for what had happened the night before. And these are the types of things that people don't readily want to talk about, because you cannot account for it. It's just like I said earlier about what happened when we were, and I call it a display, and there's two parts to the story too, and we didn't get to that, Mike. So I do call it display. So a display. So when, if you look at higher order primates like orangutans, chimps, and gorillas, when there are territorial clashes, the apes will display upon each other as opposed to immediately going into battle. That way, the display lets the other being know that there's a territory. So anytime territory crosses and there's an infringement, there's a lot of displaying, and sometimes it ends in a physical altercation, and sometimes it doesn't. It just diffuses itself. So for all intents and purposes, we were displayed upon. That to me was an act of a display. Boom, 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 boom. Like, I'm here. But I did forget to tell you about what happened the night before. So we got to go back to that. So the night before, remember, we had been on that little road and something came down at us and it went trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. Hi. Hold on. We have a visitor. I have to say hi. That's my little girl.
My little guy is over here beside me.
She's loving up the camera right now. Come here. Oh. Okay. Anyway, so the night before, and this did take me a couple of days to actually put together, but the night before, trash, 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 boom, trash, trash, and then the night of, trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. That I had been perceiving as, a deer. Remember how I'd said that night before, I go, oh, that's a deer. Well, the next night after that happened, I really felt, or the next day when I kind of put those two together, realizing that the sounds were identical and the type of display was identical. The only thing that had changed was the severity, the size, and the speed of the encounter. and the actual sound, the motion, and everything was identical. And I really felt afterwards that whatever happened, that the previous night had been something like a Sasquatch, and it really wanted me to know that it was not a deer. Like, oh yeah, no, honey, I'm not a deer. Because the instances, when you think about it, were actually identical. So that was another thing that really I had left with, right? This idea that both incidents were actually the same.
So my guess was probably right. Actually, when I'm in that area, I know their eyes are on, watching everything that's going on with us. It's been there too many times. Go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, well, I mean, honestly, if you talk to people who have had this experience time and time again, they will tell you the same thing. They seem to have a certain omniscience about them. They know what you're going to do before you do it.
It definitely seems that way. To me, they have a very thorough understanding of energy and how to manipulate that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm being interrupted by my.
They know what you focus on, and they'll utilize that information to show their presence. And again, their timing. It's incredible speed that they can react or show their presence when you do something. I had an incident sitting in a chair outside, and I put an image of a marble dropping into my hands in my head, and it happened the instant I thought of that. And it was, was that them teaching me that they can read my thoughts, see my thoughts? It seemed to be. And there's been dozens and dozens of incidents to show that they do know what we focus on.
Well, and I think too, one of the great things about right now, the time we're living in, is things are starting to have full disclosure, right? So the first disclosure, obviously, is UFOs. We're having that disclosure. And then one of the things I'm recently been fascinated with, and both, I don't want to link them all together. However, there are some fascinating things going on with the missing 411. There are some fascinating things going on with the Skinwalker Ranch, right? That kind of paranormal experience is kind of fascinating, so there's other things that are being brought to light. And like I said, I've been watching or listening to a lot about the Skinwalker Ranch, and they have a lot of this type of activity going on. Although, I think you and I both agree that not all this activity, obviously, it's not Sasquatch. There's a lot more going on than we are really privy to at any given time.
Yeah.
But I am liking all of the, a lot of the things that you're talking, Mike, even though all of your experiences have been benevolent.
Yeah.
You have a lot of the same experiences as Skinwalker. And, so one of the things, that we really do have to talk or get to talk about is this energy does kind of follow you home. And so right after my first experience in Montana, I started experiencing things at my home in California. And one of the things is I came out of my house in January. I was actually ready. I was about to walk onto a plane. I was leaving for the airport to go down to Texas and work on one of the Survivor Man episodes. And I saw vultures in my backyard, and I just decided to go out because I'd heard a very strange noise the night before. Like, I heard the weirdest noise. I didn't even want to go outside. I walked out on my deck, and I'm like, what is that? What is going on? And right before I was leaving in my backyard, I found a deer, and it was quite similar to a Skinwalker kind of idea. The deer had a perfect hole cut out of its belly. And then when I got home, I didn't have any time to do with it. I was on acreage, so I just kind of left. There's nothing I could do about it in that moment. And when I got home, the deer was gone. And I was gone for 10 days, and I know 10 days can take a carcass, but there weren't even hair left. Every ounce of that deer was gone. Like it had never been there. And I'd asked my neighbors if they'd come over. I went to my neighbors and said, hey, did you come over and get a deer out of my yard? Like there was a dead deer in my yard. Yes. When I left for Texas. And they're like, no, we didn't even know. And it really did. The deer had a perfect hole cut out of its belly. So, and again, I don't say that's Sasquatch, but it's like Nietzsche says, once you stare into the abyss stares back. And there's a lot of activity going on around us all the time. And once you engage the energy, it just knows where you are. It's pretty fascinating.
And tends to show its presence once in a while. And I also, I'm convinced, there's a UFO connection. I've had several incidents. 4 of them up there in the area that I camped, in Neff's region there. And 3 visits in a row. An object, I'm always watching up in space there at night, and especially when I'm by myself, looking for moving objects and hoping they'll, pull some crazy maneuver that is impossible by our current paradigm, current standards. And I had 3 incidents of something flying by, giving a really bright flash, basically directly overhead. And then I had 2 incidents in July last year, the 4th and 19th, 15 days apart. One was during the day and one was at night, and both had perfect conditions. One was driving north on the 400, just north of Toronto, and I was near where the airport was. And there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was like a perfectly clear sky. And it was about 12:30 in the afternoon. No long shadows yet. And I was doing about the speed limit on the highway, driving north, and I see this transport, it's just ahead of me. And all of a sudden, this large shadow was moving in the same direction as us, just slightly faster, and it enveloped the whole truck. And I didn't hear a plane. I didn't hear an engine, and I had to be low, right? And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird. And I stuck my head out the window for a second. I'm looking. There's absolutely nothing there. There was nothing there, just this massive shadow, and it just lasted a few seconds. And then it was about 2 weeks later. I was up in Neff's area, and again, it was perfect conditions. The very still night. Clear night. I could see planes off in the distance, see their lights flashing. I could hear engines at 30,000 feet, after they passed. Could hear everything, no problem. And I see this light, I'm by myself. And so I see this light in the sky, and it looks like a big plane with its headlight pointed directly at me. And I thought, well, I immediately noticed there was no flashing lights on. So I stood up and I'm watching it, and I thought, well, it's kind of weird. And it got closer, and it ended up passing over the road that I was on. I estimated it maybe a couple thousand feet in altitude, and just this big bright light, and it was completely silent. There was no hum. No propeller sound, no engine, just complete dead silence as it passed by me. And it was a UFO. I didn't see a craft or anything because the light was too bright, too big and bright. But when it doesn't make a sound, it wasn't even a drone or anything. It's just not a sound. So there's been, a few incidents, and both those incidents were, from my experience, they were put right in front of my face for me to witness purposely. And they know how to do that and get your attention. even if it just lasts, a few short seconds. They're very good at what they do. So, I'm just reiterating that I do believe there is a connection between this whole UFO phenomena and Sasquatch.
Well, and you know what what's coming up for me about this is I actually am I'm leaning towards the idea that we might want to look at the group of people that are having these experiences as opposed to trying to figure out what the phenomena is that is creating our experience. Because I think that it could be, Mike, that there is something unique about us that are able to perceive and experience this. And that could be why you and I both have we've broached this subject, and a lot of researchers do. There's almost this feeling like there's some sort of cover up about this, right? And there's also this kind of dismantling of this information constantly. Like when we put this information out there, what happens is our being, our essence, and our experience is completely ridiculed, right? Like for the most part, science and a lot of the people who are going to make comments on your YouTube channel, all they want to do is discredit. And what's really fascinating to me about that is I actually am on the side of thinking, well, why don't we start looking at these humans like you and me, and what is it about us that can be driving down a road and have that kind of experience, right? Like, why are you more privy to it than somebody else? Because obviously there were more people on the road that day, right? And I only say this because even the Sasquatch experience, right? Like, why is it that we can go into the forest and have this encounter or have had this encounter, yet there are these people that are like hunters that are avid. Oh, there's no such thing as this. This doesn't happen. It's not real. It's not real. It's fake. They're lying. We'd have a body by now. I would have seen it. I've been in those woods for 40 years. I've never had the experience. Well, yeah, you've just been in the forest and you've never had this experience. So why don't we start looking at the people who are having these experiences and finding out why? What is it about us that is sensitive to this type of data? And I do say data and input because humans and all mammals and all life, really, I mean, if you think about it in our essence, we are just receiving entities. Everything about us is about receiving. We receive touch. We receive information for sight. We receive information through sound. We receive information through smell. And so really the human is, and all mammals are a reception of data, a reception of input. So why is it that you have this experience and are interacting with it? I'm having this experience and interacting with it. Ron Moorhead is having this experience and interacting with it. And then we take someone like, honestly, and this isn't to disparage anyone. It is not to disparage a person, but let's just talk about someone in the industry like Jeffrey Meldrum, who's been in this business for or genre or this research for 40 years. And his contribution is very physical. He's got these great casts and he's done a massive, amazing body of anthropological and scientific work in this field. Yet when he goes in the field, he does not have this experience, right? So what is it? I would actually ask all of our experiencers, and I do call them experiencers out there. It doesn't matter if it's UFO, if it's Sasquatch, or if it's ghost, or whatever paranormal thing. What is unique about this human being, this human sample that actually does experience this? I think that's actually the better question than wondering what we're experiencing, what is creating that phenomena. It's highly plausible, Mike, we'll never know what's creating that phenomena. It's highly plausible that we just have this world around us that's not meant to be explained or described or known or found. We have had these paranormal experiences, and when we really think about it, we've probably been privy to this information all our lives, although I would have to be on the side of people who I don't really feel like I've had a lot of UFO experience, although I have a couple of things, and all I can say is they were unidentified flying objects, and I saw them, and I had that same experience with the big ball of light. But what's really, really unique about that experience, or fascinating to me about it, so my best friend and I were driving down a freeway at night in the Napa Valley area of California, and I saw a massive ball of light hovering right over the freeway, like hovering right over the freeway, no noise. About the same thing about I don't know how many feet off the ground. Let's say if that's 40. I don't know, maybe like 160 feet off the ground or so, 200 feet off the ground. And it was big, it was obvious. And while we're driving, I was looking at it and I asked my friend, I said, what is that? And she really she never said anything to me. And I thought that was really odd. And then the next morning I got up and I actually looked on the news, and I looked for, UFO, ball of light, anything I could find in the Napa Valley area. No reports, nothing. No one had said anything that I could find. And then I was talking with another friend. I said, I had the strangest experience last night. I know that I saw this. My friend knows I saw it because she could see that my reaction was genuine. I go, however, she won't talk to me about it. And I can't find corroboration in the news this morning. I can't find anything. And my other friend said to me, well, Sonya, maybe you were the only one that saw that. And, I had to take that in, right? I got to take that in because my friend who was sitting in the driver's seat right next to me had no interaction with it. She didn't know what I was talking about. But I know I saw what I saw, and I saw it like anything else. I saw a big, huge ball of light in the sky. And I never even called it a UFO. I just never knew what it was. And the whole story about that goes like this. We were actually driving on a area of the 80 that I had 10 years prior, I had commuted on every day. And it had been 10 years since I'd been on this road. And so it was really fascinating to me to see all the growth. So I was really paying attention. I was like, in my mind, as we were driving and talking, though, I was like, wow, that's a new subdivision. Oh, that building's new. Oh, that's new. And I'd seen this light from a distance, and it was on top of a hill, but it was just because the hill was at a distance, so it appeared to be on top of the hill. And what I had been making up, the story in my head, was I was really sad that someone had developed that hill. It had been always empty of human stuff, not even a cell tower on it. So when I saw this light on the hill, I was like, oh, someone developed on it. So I had kind of been wanting to see what was up there. And as we drove by the hill, it started to the vision started to move, like the parameters of what I was seeing changed and I realized that it wasn't on the hill at all, that it was actually hovering right over the freeway. Nobody saw it. And I'd been seeing it for a while. So there are things like that. I do get that maybe some of this information that we're receiving is very unique and to us, because it's very hard to convince anyone that we're having these experiences who does not have them. If people do not have any sort of connection to nature, like a real connection, if they don't have a sensitivity to the things that are going on around them, they don't have these experiences. And I do think it's something special and unique that you're having, that I'm having, and then a lot of people. And I had this friend once, he's out your way. I wish I could remember who this person was, but this story is great. So he was out by the Algonquin, and he was going up north to camp, and he was meeting some friends, and he got out of town late. And I really do wish I remember who told me this. So he'd gotten off of work kind of late for the weekend. He was driving out to meet some guys at a cabin to do their hunting, fishing trip or whatever they do. And on his way, he realized it was just too late. He was tired. He was exhausted. He had a tent with him. He's like, I'm just going to pitch a tent here and sleep for the night. I'll meet them in the morning. It's not a big deal. And he said he just pitched his tent in the middle of the woods somewhere out there, around your territory. And not in your area specifically, but, around the Algonquin Park. So anyway, and he said in the middle of the night, this man is a pilot too. He said in the middle of the night, he heard a plane wreck. He absolutely positively heard a plane crash. He knew something flew right over his head. He saw lights. He said it freaked him out. He's like, oh my God, people crashed. And all of his his energy was like to go out and help. And he goes, and I woke up in the morning like I fell asleep. Like, I don't know what happened. And he goes, and when I woke up in the morning, I plainly expected to get out of the tent and to help and to find a plane wreck. And there was nothing. There was not a thing. So people are having these experiences. People have the UFO experience. They have the Sasquatch experience. They have the ghost experience. I've had all of these experiences in some way or another. Things that have happened that I cannot explain. And now, like I said, my energy is really interested and curious to know why it is that we experience these things while others don't. And that's one of our challenges. That's so funny. Just because someone doesn't experience something, it's very difficult to get them to realize that you are experiencing something. And there's been so many things, Mike. I mean, you know that. When I first moved here, remember what that happened? So I have this altar in my house, right? And I have 2 cats, but I don't have roommates. I live alone. And I don't know about you, but if it's not a mouse, cats don't bring things into your house. It's not like a dog where they bring the stick in that has something from last week that smells horrible on it. Like, hey, Mom, check this out. Cats bring you dead animals. That's what cats bring you. So, and like I said, I live alone. And I walk in one day and there is a rock on my altar. You know, it obviously came from somewhere. You know, like sitting plain as day, this little tiny rock, and I still have it. I just left it there, you know. But you just have to walk into your home and just acknowledge it, going, okay, that wasn't there yesterday. That was not there yesterday, and my cats did not bring it in. And I'm open to the fact that someone decided to break into my house and leave me a rock on my altar, because that happens all the time, you know, those burglars.
that move through walls.
Yeah, they just happened to leave things, you know, in your house that you didn't leave it there, actually, but your cats did that or something. I don't know.
You mentioned something about lights, and there was a couple incidents that we experienced. Well, I experienced more because they did it in front of me and behind your back, basically. And one was asking to see an orb, which basically appeared out of thin air right after I asked it, and did a short boomerang trajectory for about a second, then disappeared. You missed that. And then there was the other one where I was walking just behind you when we were walking on the road, and I noticed there was a little light, and it was following you, and it was about a foot behind your neck. Mm-hmm. And I could see this little point of light, and it was just like right there.
And then every time I would turn, it would move. It would stay behind me. It would stay behind me, right? And I would like this, and you're like, no, it's right behind you. Yep.
And there was another weird incident too on that road that I had happened to me. It was, I can't remember, if it was 2 or 3 nights in a row that we were there, and we walked past this same area, and something, you know, it was, again, very still up there, and which it is often, which is great for recording. But something, it went right by my face as I hit this point in this road, and it was this wind, just like a whoosh, and even the sound was there, you know, and it was very bizarre. And it happened, I think it was 3 times, I can't remember, but it was definitely more than one. It was, you know, I don't think it was a bird or anything. It was just, it was too quick and very just strange. A lot of strange stuff going on up there. And then we had that night of the howling too, which, you know, that has been, I've recorded that a few times up there. One of them, you can hear moaning going on with all the howling and stuff. And, you know, it definitely sounds very much like there's Sasquatch among them, or maybe it's all Sasquatch making the sounds. I don't know.
Well, and that's the one thing about the Sasquatch too. Like the one thing if I could make any assertion about them, which I try, it's so funny. I really tried to stay like very objective and like David Paulides and say, this is just the data. This is just the data, which is great, because he doesn't want to make a theory. And I've done the same thing. I'm like, I don't know. I just have data. I don't know if I want to make a theory, but they do live. The one thing I've experienced is Sasquatch lives at the edge of our perception, and they know how to do that really well. Meaning, I can ask a lot of people who've had the experience who go in and actually research that they will just think they heard something, and then a plane comes over, right? Or they just think they're like, well, wait, and then a loud noise will happen. So they move. They're very good. They know us very well. And so I think they move and make sounds, pairing along with other phenomena. And I do have audio actually of a rock throw when I was in Canada, and we had a rock thrown at us. And what's really interesting, if you listen to the audio, you can actually hear footsteps. You hear bump, 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 bump right before the rock throw. But way in the distance, you hear a car down on the lower road where the trailhead was. And we were heading back to the trailhead to leave the park for the night. And you actually do. You hear a car. You hear the car come. You hear the boom, boom, boom. And then you hear the rock hit. So they do have a tendency, or not a tendency, they live on the edge of our perception. And so if people aren't paying attention, it's very easy to miss something. And with that howling we heard that night, both you and I heard a loud, like something. It was not wolf, it was not coyote, but as soon as it started, then the wolves kicked in. It was just like it started it. It was almost like if a band leader did the warm up to get the whole band to start, right? There's like a woo, and we're like, both of us kind of, what? And then the wolves just boom. And they went, and then the coyotes kicked in, right? So it went boom, whatever the noise was, then the wolves kicked in, and then the coyotes did. And in a matter of, I would say 30 minutes. And that was after we had been in the forest that night. That's why we went back to sit and listen, right? So we went back. Anyway, so that happened like in waves. Like there were at least maybe 4 of them where you heard like, and it just kept happening over the matter of about 40 minutes. And in that happening, I actually had a strange reaction to the wolves. It was very weird. Like I had a physiological reaction to it. Like I could hear them, and for some reason it wasn't uncomfortable. The hearing it was good, but there was something else going on, and I can't really describe it, but I was just having a reaction to it. And remember, it almost felt, I don't know how to explain it, but again, that is something I've noticed, and I've noticed a lot, that they do live at the edge of our perception. Right when you start to hear something, a plane will go by. Right when you hear something, a train will start to happen. Right when you hear something you'll be like listening to something, and it's right when even your friend will blurt out, like start talking to you, and you're like, no, just shh, I'm hearing something. So I really feel that they are watching us. They're very aware of us, especially in the forest. And that's not even a stretch of the imagination. Like all the animals are aware of us when we're in the forest. We stink and we're loud, and we can't, we're stink and we're loud, and it takes a great effort. Ask any hunter. It takes a great effort to actually camouflage yourself so you're not known in the forest. It's actually a concerted effort. And to give you an example of that, one of my friends who's a hunter in California, he said one of the most beautiful and amazing and just wonderful things he ever saw happen while he was hunting is he was on a ridge. There was a canyon. There's a ridge over here. He's on this ridge. There's a ridge over here, and there's a canyon in between. And so he sees his buck walking along, and he shoots. He's got the buck right in his sight. And just as he's about to shoot, the buck like really lifts up his head and looks. And so he looks. The hunter doesn't pull the trigger, and he looks, and he sees 3 hunters coming down, or 2 hunters. No, there were 3 hunters kind of coming down. They're doing their thing. And so he didn't shoot because it's not safe. He doesn't know how many other hunters there. But what he said was, I watched the deer, and it was the most fascinating and wonderful thing. He said that buck knew those hunters were coming. And so he lightly took a step forward, then he took a step to the right, then he took a step to the back, and he cowered. And he just laid there, and all three men walked by. And that hunter watched him do it. And so he didn't shoot that buck. He didn't take him. And he said it was just beautiful. And so my point of even telling that story is the animals know we're in the forest, and they're savvy and they're smart and they smell us. So even that buck right there, like just something like a buck, it's not even a Sasquatch, right? He watched as that buck knew that those men were looking for him. He knew he had to be quiet, and he actually knew he could get out of it. All he had to do was hide, and they couldn't see him. So again, the point is that when we go into the forest, we're noisy and we stink. So whatever is in that forest knows that we're there. And so they play around us, and that would happen. That's my experience of dealing with Sasquatch, because there's been a lot of time where I start to hear something, or you start to experience something, and a plane, like literally a plane will go over. And if you remember David Paulides and the missing 411, one of the things that he talks about in all of his cases is where the search starts to happen and the weather goes bad. So something knows that the weather's going to be bad, right? Something knows that the weather is going to shift. And we all know that animals know this. All the animals know this.
I've witnessed many times how the Sasquatch utilize other sounds to cover their footsteps, or they'll let you hear what they want you to hear. And they do exactly that, what you were just talking about. And also these I just have to laugh at these guys, these people involved in this subject, who run around in camo thinking they're being quiet, putting up their trail cams.
I know.
Like, come on, guys, get with the program, man. You want to learn something, just be yourself. That's it.
Your fingerprints on a trail cam for, I don't know for how many hours, probably a good like 7 to 8 hours, will exude a smell. The trail cams are funny to me too. Everyone says you have to catch it on a trail cam. Well, I don't think people who say that actually have trail cams, because yeah, you do catch a lot of animals on trail cams. However, every animal I've ever caught on a trail cam looks at the trail cam no matter what. Even if you have infrared, like, they know that trail cam is there. As soon as that light goes off, they're like, they look. So they have another perception about these things, and they can smell us on them. But they know. Oh my god. So they were tracking some tigers in Siberia, and they were hoping that this female would mate and cross boundaries, because, of course, they're critically endangered. And they had a trail cam wondering where this one female tiger was. And they put this trail cam up in the middle of winter. And this is an animal that's not even in a park. We're talking Siberia. You know what I mean? Like, we're not, there's no humanity out there, like way out there. And they're wanting to see if she's pregnant. They put a trail cam up, and it was so beautiful. They did capture her. They knew her territory. They were able to capture her, but it was one photo, and all it was her off in the distance. I mean, like, one photo of her a good distance from the cam, and you can tell she walked up and looked at it, and she hissed. Her whole face is a snarl. She heard that camera, and she looked, and she goes... So, and that's a tiger. So we're talking about, and I don't believe there's a linear progression to life and intelligence and consciousness. Matter of fact, I believe that that's a human fallacy about this linear progression to intelligence. However, that is a tiger in the woods, and we're talking now about this, bipedal North American primate that has these ethereal qualities, and you think you're going to catch it on a trail cam.
Only if they want you to.
Only if they want you to. That's right. And Rich Drumeau was able to capture one, and he will tell you, I don't want to take his glory away, but he'll tell you that one photo cost him his relationship with them. He won't do the research anymore, and he was very adamant. He will say that he does not research anymore because of that one photo. What he did was he placed a trail cam in a creek, right, in some rocks. And so he knew that they would come over this direction. He placed it this direction. It was under the water, or it was around the water. He put a mask around it, and he put like a weird mask around it. I'm not really sure why, but and he had completely covered it. Well, it didn't have a scent, it didn't have a sound, and so they walked over this way, and he got a shot of what he calls a blonde Sasquatch. And after that, they just weren't having it, according to him, and he stopped doing his physical research because of it.
I was using a trail cam at first up in this area until they, left that first little ice cream plastic top on my car, and that was when, I think that was when things changed. Took trail cam down, but then after a while started using the camera again as a tool for interaction instead of trying to trick them. Here's a device if you want to play with it. And we ended up with literally dozens of images, and to a point now, even video. They've given video. It's all ambiguous. It's there's some hair, but nothing with any real details. But it got really interesting what they were imposing on the cameras and stuff. So, they will give that stuff. If you approach it properly, I guess.
Well, and I've always said too, and it's very interesting. The one thing I do want to talk about, in Dave Paulides' Missing 411, The Hunted, if you watch the very last scene, and I suggest that you do, the woman actually takes a photo of what she was experiencing in the woods. She was in a deer blind, and she experienced something, and she took a photo of it, or she was taking photos of it, and then a picture appeared on her camera, and that photo, her husband actually, you really have to watch that, but her husband analyzes the photo, and the basic premise, or the basic thing, is that the actual photo that she took, and then there's another photo in that group, one of the photos that makes no sense. She didn't feel like she had taken that photo, and it makes no sense when you actually get the data from that photo. The data, the information, the way the file is, it was not possible for it to happen on that camera. That camera doesn't do that file size. That camera doesn't do that type of photo. So I'm not a photographic expert, but I would highly suggest any of you listening to definitely watch the Missing 411, The Hunted, the very last scene, specifically where they show you a photo that cannot come off of the camera that took it. The data is not right. And so, yeah, that does happen. They do play with our electronics. And I've actually had, so the way I use these electronics, and I do think they're good and valuable, is I always set it up. I use them as a buffer for what I'm not seeing. Like, I want to know if I put a trail cam out and I've left a gift, I want to make sure that it's not a raccoon. So I'm not leaving my information to catch a Sasquatch. I'm actually doing this trail cam and audio and that kind of stuff to eliminate, to vet what it could possibly be. And recently, and I'll have to send you the picture, Mike, and when you do, you can add it to this, right? So I asked that, I set my trail cam outside my camping trailer, and I specifically said, I'm not setting this up for you. I'm setting it up so that I see that it could be something else that may not be you. And then I also said, however, if you want to show me something, I'm open to that too. I don't have to have a photo of you. And so that night, two things happened. I got an image of a fog right outside the door, and then I have this image of light that has no sense. It makes no sense. And I'll send that photo to you with the light. And what's really odd about that is, oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I do want to add though, even though I looked at the data information, both of those photos were taken within the parameters of what my camera will do. So it's not that kind of odd, but the light, it has this light shining down, but then there's a line that actually stops. So it's really bizarre. There's a very distinct line, and there's light shining down from it. And I had specifically set up my trail cam and said, this isn't for you. I'm just wanting to see what's not you. But if you want to leave me something, please do. And it did.
There's definitely
I'm sorry. No, my cats are playing right now, and they're brother and sister, and they usually don't play. They're, and so it's just sweet to see them out there. They're running around chasing each other. Anyway.
Yeah, I was just saying.
They're playing like kittens, and I haven't seen that in a while. That's all.
That's good. Yeah, I've witnessed some strange light phenomena too with this, this stuff that goes on. One incident was Dwayne and I sitting outside, and it was completely overcast. There was just a slight snowfall at the time, and there was no, none of the neighboring cottages. There was no lights on. Nobody was around, and this light comes on the forest floor, and it was about, I think it was 20 to 30 feet long. It was tapered to a point, and it was like a triangle on the forest floor with no defined sharp edges, and it was the color of moonlight. It was just a soft glow around the edges, but it was definitely there, and it came on like a light switch. And it was on for about 5 seconds and then shut off like a light switch. And Dwayne and I said to him, "You saw that, didn't you? Did you see that?" "Yeah, I saw that." So I think whoever did that, they were aware that we were both looking at, in the same direction at the same time. They always seem to know where your focus is, and yeah, it's strange, and lots of strange stuff that comes with this.
A lot of strange things, and that's and that's such a good point, because honestly, I always start off my talks, and people ask me about Bigfoot, and I always say, I usually always start off saying I wasn't a believer. I was not a believer. I thought Sasquatch was like a jackalope. I really did. I thought Sasquatch was the jackalope of the Pacific Northwest. I was not a believer until I wasn't even open to it until I saw the Jimmy Chilcutt show where he found dermal ridges, and from the dermal ridges he could make an assertion that there was a non-disclosed non-human primate in North America. And that opened my mind to it, and it still took me, that was 2007, and I did theoretical research until about 2012. So 5 years, all I did was just theoretical research until I finally went into the field. And I went into the field, and I had an experience. It was very interesting. I went to a space out in Montana where a gentleman had been having all kinds of encounters, and then for some reason the encounters had stopped, and so he was kind of panicked, and he wanted to see if maybe new energy or someone else could come out and see what was going on. And so I spent I think I was a total of 7 to 9 days out there. It's been a while, but for like the first 5 days nothing happened, and then the last 3, that's when I had my first encounter, and that's when I really was introduced to this idea that they were fast. I just, again, being so new and not really understanding what I was experiencing, I didn't really have any sort of idea that's what's happening. But in essence, it was during the daytime. It was actually it was at sundown, and we were looking at this field, and in the field the cow elk were coming out in the evening. And way across, the cow elk were only like this big, I was squinting, but you could see them start coming out in the field for the night. And then in the trees off in the distance, way across, there was this loud crack. And now looking back, we do know that this crack noise, this very loud noise, often accompanies a sighting. And matter of fact, again, I'll mention that David Paulides in the Missing 411, The Hunted, when one of the people go missing, that loud sound was there. They actually talk about that. So I had this very loud crack, and I look at my my partner and at that time and my Sasquatch partner, and I look at them and I'm like, hey, and they go, oh no, that was the elk. The bull elks will snap, break things, and that's what that was. I'm like, okay. So then all of a sudden there was this a really loud crack, another one, but it was closer this time. And he looked at me, kind of raised eyebrow. He goes, "Ah, this was probably a male elk still." And then the third time it was, directly alongside, and it was at a distance, and it was crack. And then he knew. He's like, "Are you ready? This is Sasquatch." He goes, "Nothing moves in the forest that fast." And then there was another crack. And then finally there was a crack right behind us. I mean, directly behind us. Crack. And then he asked, he said, "Can you go in the forest and talk to it?" Well, of course I could. I mean, I don't know what it is. I wasn't really afraid at that time. And I didn't have any reservations. I didn't know what I was dealing with. And I walked into the forest and I started to talk to it. And I didn't even know what to say. I felt kind of odd, You just go into the blank forest and start speaking to something that you don't know what it is, and you don't even know if it. At that time, I still wasn't even a believer. I really wasn't. I was like, "You have to prove this to me. I'm not really sure that I'm a believer." And then the very last day, and I've said this before, after these occurrences, the very last day, I followed this sound into the forest, and it sounded like a gorilla. It really and I've always said this, and it's kind of funny, but either someone's designer pet gorilla was loose in the forest, or there's such a thing as Sasquatch. It kept making these noises. One of the noises it would make would be but it's really loud. It's the very same kind of chest bump that a gorilla makes when a silverback gorilla makes a sound to exit, to move the troop, to talk to them. He pounds his chest. And that's the same kind of sound, and that's exactly what I was hearing. That sound kind of drew me into the forest for quite a ways, until I finally just realized that there was this huge distance being created between my partner and myself. And my partner was out there on the logging road with a gun. He didn't want to come into the forest with me. And so I went into the forest for quite a ways until I finally just said I was going to stop. And when I stopped, ultimately, and I'm really condensing the story and this interaction, but it made this very beautiful, long, gurgling kind of sound to me. And I remember turning to my partner, look to that direction, saying, are you messing with me? Do you hear that?" And he's like, "I'm right here. I'm not doing anything." He had his hands up in the air. He's like, "Just keep talking to it." And so I did. And it made another sound like that. It sounded like, if you Google gorilla purr, you will get a link from Coco purring. I highly suggest, if you're interested, to listen to that sound. That is pretty much exactly what I heard in Montana. So I didn't know that gorillas purred. How I found this out was when I went home from that experience in Montana, I got on the computer and I just was Googling all kinds of North American animal vocalizations. I did not want to be mistaken about what I heard. And when I was listening to raccoon vocalizations, who have a large amount of vocalizations, raccoons have about 22 different vocalizations. And so I was listening to all of them, and I said, on the last one, it said purring. Well, I didn't know at that moment that any animal purred besides a cat. I believed that purring was a uniquely feline sort of activity. And so I was really shocked. And then I was like, raccoons purr? And then I was like, well, what animals purr? And when then Google came back, it actually had a list of different beings that purr, and gorillas happened to be one of them. Gorillas purr when they eat. When I was in the forest that time, I was giving that being, whatever it was, I was leaving an apple for it because I had to leave and I didn't know what else to do. And so I just left it an apple, and it actually purred. And that is exactly what I heard. So please, if you're listening to this, Google, or maybe Mike could put the link and I'll find it for you. But that is exactly what I heard. And so that's what convinced me. But then again, this is my first encounter, and I must express to you, this was my very first encounter. And this is also when I realized that something was different from the very first interaction. And I just say this because as we were leaving, and I had to leave, this was the end of my my trip. I had to go back home, and we were driving away on the ATV, headed back to base camp to pack up for the night. In the morning, I had to leave to go back to California. I was in Montana, and when we were driving away, I started to cry. I was consumed with grief. Now, this is one of the Sasquatch encounter phenomena, and that is out of context emotional experiences. I am not the only one to have this. Other researchers talk about this, other experiencers talk about this. You will have an out of context emotional experience. Most of the times it's an out of context fear. Hunters will talk about this. Like all of a sudden I was terrified and I didn't know why. Like I was looking, nothing was around me, but I was terrified. But in this moment, I was not afraid. What happened was I had this deep, deep sadness and I started to cry. And I realized that I was not having a private experience. I realized in that moment that I was having a shared experience. Whatever that sorrow for me leaving was not me entirely. It was whatever I had encountered. I could feel the depth of his sorrow. And it was enormous. And I just started to cry. So I've not been back to Montana. And every time I tell this story, I feel like I need to go back to Montana. Maybe perhaps that being was very lonely. Maybe there's so few of them now because of forest devastation and habitat loss. And they do have to have a habitat, let's admit it, like they live in the forest. Maybe he's one of the guys that's just out there by himself.
I'm sure there's some like that, and there's also many, from what I'm gathering, many little ones running around. And go ahead. I see that look.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing about this. It's that how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? I mean, based on what we're learning at the Skinwalker Ranch, there's a lot more out there, and that's the harder thing. When you're coming from a scientific, rational, logical mindset, which I would honestly say that I am. I studied anthropology in school. I love animals. I love zoology. I love science. I'm not anti-science. I like the fact that you can test something and repeatable and have evidence, and I like the logic of science. And this gets bigger than we can possibly imagine, because the truth is, if you do really watch, and you had recommended that George Norrie, there's a recent George Norrie discussion.
Knapp.
Oh, George Knapp. Did I combine their names? I did.
No, they're both George, right?
Oh, George Norrie and George Knapp. Yeah, okay, George Knapp. Anyway, if you watch his most recent YouTube video at a conference talking about the Skinwalker Ranch, you just have to start realizing that, oh my goodness, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah, no, you're just lost you. Okay, it just had a bit of a pause there. So we had some dead battery issues. So anyways, going to wrap this up. And I want to thank the lovely Sonya for coming on here, and just love that you finally, were able to speak out and validate this stuff that was, these experiences with Nefertiti and family, and all your other own experiences, that align with the same thing that many of us are experiencing at this point. There's a lot of people involved in this subject that still, they just don't get it. They can't accept this paranormal side, but if you're involved in this long enough, put enough effort in, sooner or later, you're going to get your answer. And I just wanted to mention too, at the end of this, because Sonya did this awesome children's book, which, she gave me a copy of this a couple years back, I can't remember what it was. And, this is a great introduction for the kids, for the children to, learn about our forest friends. So, if you're interested in Sonya's awesome job here, this little children's book, I think you can find it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Called Sasquatch Sonya. And is there, any other contact information or anything that needed to,
No, I'll give you a link. You can get that on Amazon, and then also I'll let you know too. I will be speaking in October at a conference, and as I said earlier, I've done everything I could possibly do to not have a theory, but um, just given the body of evidence of everything that we have now, I actually think I've stumbled on something that could actually shed some light on what they could possibly be and how they interact with us. So I'm really looking forward to that disclosure. I'm working on it right now, and by October, I may have a little bit of an ebook up by then. I think it's something, I'm not quite ready for a book, but I think it's fodder for a book. So I may have an ebook up if you're interested. But yeah, I will be speaking at a conference in Kingston, Washington in October. Please come out. And all of you that is watching, and look, Mike has had a very challenging time with the subject matter because there's been so many people who don't believe, and that's fine. I mean, we're faced with that all the time. I'm not attached to whether or not you believe me. I just can tell you my experiences, and if you believe them, great. If you don't, great. Like, that's not my thing. But to all of you who constantly are coming after Mike and saying he's a hoax, I only have one thing to say to you: go to his territory. Go to his territory.
Don't trespass, or we're gonna get you.
Well, I mean, and I'm just saying that all of these people who are these naysayers have actually not been in your territory. They've not actually physically stepped into the area that you are. They've not had the experience, but yet they're very readily able to say that your experience is not valid. And that's kind of the, ultimately that's kind of the Bigfoot world anyway. And it's so funny to me, like, I remember the first time I had to actually say to myself, Bigfoot, like, oh my God, Sasquatch, like, is real. Like, it's a thing. Like, it's not a hoax. Like, the whole thing is, yes, there are people who are hoaxing, and yes, there are lots of people who don't believe, but the actual experience actually is there, and there is something in the forest. And when you start to realize that as a rational person, and then you get to say, okay, not only do I believe it, but I want to know more about it. And then you have to tell people in your family and your friends and your social work and even in your career field that, you look for Bigfoot, and it separates you, and people have odd things to think about you. And even to this day, my grandmother thinks I'm crazy. She's like, she'll tell me to my face, Sonya, you're crazy, which is fine. This is what she believes, but she also has not had the experience. So I would just say to everyone right now listening, reserve your judgment and reserve your opinion if you have not had the experience. Because realistically, you don't know what you're talking about. That's ultimately it.
There's those people too that, like, I know with Dwayne's property, we've had trouble with people trespassing, and it's still going on today. They're stalking, trespassing. They've been at it for years, and I don't think they get anything because of their intention. So they're watched. The Sasquatch know they're there, but I don't think they're giving them anything. And
well, there is that, and that's another part of this. And I know we're trying to close it up, but it's hard to not talk about this. But that's something we didn't even actually discuss today, and that is they know your intention. They do.
Yeah.
They, if you talk to anybody who's really doing this and been doing it for a long time, they'll tell you straight up, they choose you. You don't choose them. They don't have to. They don't have to make themselves known at all.
No, and they can stand right beside you, and you wouldn't know it unless they let you know.
Yes. So, and they're in the forest, and they're there all the time. And so, again, reserve your judgments until you have the experience. It's not like, I'm not even trying to be harsh to other people and cast shade on other people, but there is this situation where I would really, want to impress upon you, if you haven't had an experience of something, that does not mean that other people have not had that experience, or that experience is not valid. And there's a lot of hardcore people who are like a naturalist and outdoors people, and they say, oh, we'd have a body, and it's so funny to me when we hear these arguments. I just also want to let you know, if you're not a non-believer, all of these arguments that you're going to come at us with, we've heard them all. We've heard them all. We get it. Guess what? We haven't found a Sasquatch body. We don't have bones. We know that. We don't have bones.
They're highly underestimated in their intelligence by many involved in this subject. Their intelligence, it's through the roof. It's crazy.
Well, And even with that said, I invite all of you big people, hunter people that think that this is just a hoax and it's not real, or even all of you lay people who don't go into the forest. I just want to invite you. Please go out in the forest and bring me home a black bear skull. I really want a black bear skull. Okay? Or go get me a cougar skull. Go find me one of those in the forest. Right? Yeah, exactly. You know, you people have been hunting their whole year, and sometimes you bring some antlers out, and once every now and then you find a carcass. And we're talking about something that doesn't bury its dead. We have things in the forest that take away bones. I mean, it takes approximately, what is it, 10 days for a deer carcass to be gone, right? In the forest, there are things that eat these things. Everything eats everything.
Yeah, I've seen that video where they tie that carcass down and put a camera on its time lapse.
Time lapse, and it's gone, you know, like psh, gone. And yeah, you'll find some hair and some fur, because fur, there's a couple of things about fur. Fur is, first of all, fur is non-digestible. Hair and fur are non-digestible. So you pass it, or it just stays on the ground. So hair will be there for a while, but that's it. You know? So it's interesting. That's one of those arguments. Oh, we haven't found a body. Well, and we haven't found bones. And, you know, we have found bones of Gigantopithecus. We do have a fossil record for Gigantopithecus. And I heard once, and I don't know how true this is, and I never researched it, but I did hear that you only find fossils of things that are extinct.
There is a story in Tom Powell's last book, Edges of Science, about, I think it was two researchers stumbled across a burial site, Sasquatch burial site, and it was intricately placed rocks, and they had to spend a lot of time taking that apart. And from what I read in the book there, the two of them got to visit that home at night by a very angry paranormal Sasquatch, telling them to put everything back as they found it or else. So there has been, you know, burial site found.
Well, and that goes back to that one place, and well, and that goes back to that one place. You know, Mike and you and I were hiking, and we found that place that I succinctly believe is a burial site. Now, I don't know what the burial was. Do you remember that site?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, the energy there was so dense. I didn't even want to take photos. Like, I look at those photos and like, I knew the minute we found that, remember? And so basically there were these mounds, and there were rocks placed on them, and there were trees placed over them. They were very specific, and they were very large mounds. They were probably 8 to 10 feet long, with a height of about 3 to 4 feet. And they had been manicured and covered, and they were mounds, and there was probably about 7 or 8 of them. As soon as we got cut through the tree line, and actually kind of this space opened up to us, and I saw what we were seeing, I didn't want to be there. Remember, I was freaking out. I'm like, we got to get out of here. Like, we're not supposed to be here. So I don't know if that was Sasquatch, if that was Native American, indigenous, but whatever it was, we were not supposed to be there. So I'm shocked that Tom Powell would actually go try to dismantle this scene, because the energy.
No, it wasn't him that did that. It was
okay.
researchers. He just relayed the story. So.
Oh yeah, no, I remember. Do you remember that? How odd that was? I was like, okay, and you're like looking around. I took a few pictures. I still have the pictures of it. I can get those pictures to you. I'd have to find them, but I should send those to you, because that was very interesting. But I did not feel in any way, shape, or form we should be there. There was such a foreboding when we found that. I actually reported that. The foreboding was so strong to me when I left. I reached out to someone in Canada who's Canadian, CSIS, and I asked him to investigate that area and gave him the coordinates. Because I didn't know if it was Sasquatch or indigenous or possibly something else, because the energy seemed very, very heavy, and we were not welcome. It was very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It was an interesting week there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah. Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Thanks,
yes.
Sonya. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, you're welcome, and thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
You know, My pleasure. And Sonya's the second eyewitness to validate Neff and family's activity. Chris Munch was the other one. He was invited to the cottage, spent 3 nights there, and he witnessed some pretty crazy stuff. Marbles appearing out of thin air on more than one occasion, and in other instances. Anyway, so there's been a couple of eyewitness accounts now to this situation. And, other than that, it's been very private, except obviously sharing all this stuff about it. But it's too incredible not to share. So again, thanks, Sonya, and hope everybody enjoys this. It was a bit of a long talk, but it's all good. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, bye everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. See you later.
Yeah, the who?